Welcome to Breaking the Cycle of Poverty, featuring Jay Height, Executive Director of Shepherd Community Center in Indianapolis. My name is Tim Swearens, and I'm your host for these conversations that explore why poverty remains such a persistent problem in the United States. On this episode, Jay and David Armistead, Senior Vice President with Atlanta-based DC Blox, discuss a new partnership.
Yeah, I'm excited, and having got to know some friends there at DC Blox. David is joining us today from Birmingham, and first tell us a little bit of what does DC Blox do, and then how does that translate into the Near East Side of Indianapolis?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. DC Blox is a data center company. As you mentioned, we're based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we've been operating since 2014, building data centers primarily in underserved communities. That's been our history. So we've gone into places like Birmingham, Alabama, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Greenville, South Carolina, places that didn't have digital infrastructure. More recently, we've been expanding into bigger markets. Of course, we have large projects around the Atlanta metro, but our customers have asked us to continue to expand with them. And most recently, that's been to Indianapolis, Indiana. So we're getting out of the Southeast and kind of expanding there into the Midwest. So, how does this evolution? What does it mean to the Far East Side? We actually found a location that is at the old Ford Visteon manufacturing site. It's an I3 zoned brownfield redevelopment that has power nearby, and data centers are just really simple. They're a lot more simple than people think. They're buildings that are concrete buildings that have computers inside, and we provide electricity and air conditioning to those computers. So what we're doing in the east side of Indy is optical network gear that basically runs the internet. It's not AI. I know that's a really scary thing for a lot of people, but it does bring more infrastructure, more digital infrastructure and networking capabilities to Indianapolis and the east side of Indy in particular. One of the things that I've been with the company now for over 6 years, and one of the things that attracted me to DC Blox is the culture. And so we're not just a data center company building buildings and providing, compute capabilities to these regions. There's a really strong service component to the company that attracted me to DC Blox. In fact, it's in our mission statement, which is to serve locally and connect globally. So while we provide computing capabilities and we connect computers around other data centers around the world, we very much are interested in building up the communities where we operate. And we have done that historically in places like Birmingham, Alabama, where I live. And we're very interested in partnering with Shepherd in Indianapolis to do a lot of the same types of things that we've done in other markets.
Yeah, we appreciate that interest. Our conversation has been, how could we together bring additional services and invest into the lives of the youth of our community, to invest in adults, families, and I appreciate those opportunities. Tim, you know that we have lots of needs in our community.
Yes.
It's never lacking. And what I have found intriguing and very affirming to that culture that David spoke about, was that they did not come in and say, this is what we want to do. You have asked the community in lots of meetings, what are the challenges? We've been exploring that, looking at, there's a new study that just was released on the needs of the community as defined by the community. And so then our conversation with DC Blox and Shepherd Community is then how together could we help meet the needs that have been defined. It is a bit controversial these days when you say the term data center, and it's what I like to say, there are a lot of preachers, and some of them are bad, but we're not all bad. Right. There's just a few. There's even editorial writers, right? Columnists that are good, and there's bad, right?
Right.
But you're not all bad.
Yeah.
I found in exploring and understanding the data centers, there are differences in how data centers operate and what do they do for the community, and not just what you're required in the negotiations to do, but what you do over and above that. David, could you help us understand what's the difference between maybe some companies that we may have heard of other names and DC Blox?
Yeah, that's a great thing to point out. A lot of people go online on their phones, on social media, and they see a lot of bad things about data centers that have operated in other places. And I think people pick all the worst things that they've seen, and they then associate that to all data centers. Just like Jay, you were talking about, not all ministers are bad, or not, there are, and I'll say that as a preacher's kid, what they say about preacher's kids. So
Yeah.
we're not all bad. But for DC Blox, we are very responsible in how we come into communities and how we operate. So, the big concerns that we hear about are noise, water usage, power rates, just some top three things. You don't have to look far to see a data center provider in Tennessee, over in Memphis, where they implemented gas turbine engines to be their primary source of power for the data center, which they sound like jet engines. They're very loud, and the community is rightfully upset because they're having to deal with the noise coming from that facility. DC Blox does not do any gas turbines. We run off the grid. We pay for our own power and the power infrastructure needed for our facility, but we don't do that. And we do test our emergency generators once a month for 30 minutes, but they're actually very quiet. Where I live in Alabama, we've been operating here for over 8 years, and we have had no complaints from neighbors. And we're not far from a residential area. For water usage, there are data center companies that literally use millions of gallons of water for evaporative cooling purposes every day. And so they're either drawing this from rivers or from aquifers. DC Blox does not do that. We don't drill any wells at our site. We don't source water from rivers or aquifers. We use what's called a closed loop technology for cooling. And so our data center campus, like the one we have proposed for Indianapolis, uses about as much water as 11 households on a daily basis. And that's just because of our employee count, because we're using sinks and restrooms. We'll also use water for irrigation for the grass, but that's it. So to your point, Jay, there are a lot of data centers out there that have done some very offensive things, but DC Blox is very responsible in how we do our projects. And we've got the track record that we can stand behind in the dozen communities where we have built and operated these facilities.
David, DC Blox recently released a set of commitments to the community in connection to its proposed data center here in Indianapolis. Explain what those commitments are, and how does the connection with Shepherd fit in with those commitments?
Yeah, the commitments that we have listed, I think there are 20 that we published in a press release. And those primarily go to those big concerns that people are worried about. What about the noise? What about the water usage? What about the lights? Are you going to have a lot of bright lights that are glaring and offensive to the neighbors? And so we've put into our commitments assurances that we will not do those offensive things. And what's important about that is that those commitments are recorded and they're enforceable, and they stay with the property. So even if at some future date DC Blox were to sell the property, those commitments are bound to the land, and they will continue even if DC Blox were to sell the property. So those are legally binding commitments that we have made above and beyond what's required for our development and for the property. But your question about how does that relate to Shepherd community, in our commitments, we have also pledged a multi-million-dollar investment that will be used for direct benefit for Warren Township and the East Side, that is above and beyond the tax revenues that will come into the East Side and into the broader Indianapolis, Marion County area through real and personal property taxes. So it will be at least $2 million. We're expecting it will be more than that. And, we are partnering with Shepherd Community in the work that it's doing to help us understand how those investments can be applied and best used for community benefit, to do many of the things to address the community needs that Shepherd is working on, for things like student programming, family engagement, food insecurity, all the things that are part of Shepherd's ministry, which really align well with DC Blox and what we've done in other communities.
Well, I appreciate your interest of the community and caring. The one thing I want to highlight, because this is something not mandated by law, but DC Blox and AES, our power company, have agreed this. This is important to know. You're paying 100% of your electrical bill. In other places, they're paying only a portion. Mm-hmm. And this is 100%, plus you're upgrading the power grid in that area, which will benefit everyone in that community.
Yeah, that is something that's part of our commitment as well. So thank you for bringing that up. DC Blox has committed to pay for all of its power upgrades, everything from transmission, distribution, and generation. And the reason that's important is so that the cost of upgrading substations, transmission lines, and so forth does not get transferred to ratepayers, so that the community members have to burden that cost. DC Blox is committed to paying 100%. Again, as Jay said, that's not required by law. But that is something that we are committed to do. We've put it in our commitments, which is legally binding and enforceable. And when these upgrades need to occur, if it were not for DC Blox or a company like DC Blox paying for those upgrades, then they would naturally go to the ratepayer. And I'll give you a quick example. At the Thunderbird Commerce Center, which is the former Ford Visteon manufacturing site, which is our site location for Indianapolis, there is an existing substation at that property. And if you walk by and you see it, you would see that it looks kind of old. It looks like it was probably built in the 50s. And at some point in time, and that it could be 15 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever, that facility is going to have to be updated. And we know from experience that that would be tens of millions of dollars. If we go build a new substation, typically those are going to be north of $50 million. And so if DC Blox was not here to do that upgrade and to pay for that upgrade, pay for the transmission line upgrades, when the time came to do the upgrade, if it were not for us, then it would naturally go to AES ratepayers. But by DC Blox paying for that now, it strengthens the grid in that area, which for AES customers will mean more reliable service. And so that's just a kind of a side benefit for DC Blox, covering the cost so it doesn't go to the community.
I think we have lots of information out there. Some of it's true, some of it's accurate, that we read about this whole debate. I wanted, and the reason why today to have this conversation, as Shepherd works to break the cycle of poverty in the Near East Side, we can only do that because individuals, businesses, churches, foundations come alongside and help us do that. I appreciate the interest, and there's no quid pro quo here. There is no guarantee on what's going to happen with DC Blox. We would like to see them come in. But this idea that they want to make a commitment to the community is refreshing. And I hope that what we hear from this today is that this is what we need more individuals and more businesses committing to doing and stepping up and making the commitment like DC Blox is making to say, we come, we build here, we're going to be a part of the community and we're going to invest in the lives. Every kid in Indianapolis is going to be invested in. The question's by who? Every kid's going to be mentored. The question's by who? And we need the partnerships with people like DC Blox to make that happen. And so, David, please express our appreciation of your interest and how you continue to explore that with us. And thank you for taking time this afternoon to walk us through what's happening. Why are we even at the table having these conversations?
Thank you, David and Jay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
For 41 years, Shepherd Community has made a lasting difference in the lives of thousands and thousands of neighbors. The Shepherd team couldn't do that work without the support of donors, partners, and volunteers. To learn more about how you can help, please visit shepherdcommunity.org. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.